I want to say hi, welcome. Thank you for being here for another edition of RocGrowth Candids. My name is Chris Cooley, virtual edition. My name is Chris Cooley. I'm a local entrepreneur, huge supporter of RocGrowth, and been a participant for a long time in the team behind the scenes. I am really stoked today to hear from Jason and Zach about the developments in and around the cannabis industry. We had a huge number of registration people registering this time around. And so that obviously speaks volumes to this topic and how important it is for a lot of different reasons. I want to say that the format of this session is interview style. So we're going to do a little bit of back and forth with our interviewees and Richard Glazer, who's the
and one more moment. I'm sorry. This is really, we try to be very inclusive. Antoinetta is awaiting closed caption. Are we able to put that on?
Oh,
thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
there should be a live transcript that should show up on the bottom. If from an accessibility standpoint, that should be on. And so if anybody does need a transcribed service, it's there. So just a quick format for today: interview, and in the middle we'll do a PSA. So we've got three sort of presenters that are going to chime in for a couple minutes and talk about some community endeavors that are happening, and then we'll do a little more Q&A/interview. So without further ado, we're creating these positive creative collisions still in a virtual format. That's what we're doing today. For those of you who've been to any live events pre-COVID, you know that that's what we're all about. So Richard, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you. I hope everyone is enjoying their mild February. I think we got a dose of real winter here, at least in the Northeast and Rochester. I've seen many familiar faces, new faces as well. Welcome to the RocGrowth community. We've been around for 6.5 years, and our mission is to empower the new Rochester. We like to instigate creative collisions, and we have to do that virtually for the most part these days. And that's to facilitate people who ought to know each other to get to know each other. And we also like to highlight our community's great entrepreneurs and innovators. And we welcome back Zach Sarkis, who was a guest of a previous RocGrowth Candids, perhaps a little over a year ago, when we used to conduct them in person. And in addition, everything we do is informed by promoting greater equality of race, class, gender, and age. And diversity and inclusion, as we've addressed in previous events that were dedicated to the subject, have been proven to be a driver of innovation and economic growth. So we feel attached to that commitment as well. So welcome today. We're addressing a very topical subject, and we're fortunate again in our community to have two residents who I would call experts in the subject matter at hand. I have Zach Sarkis somewhere on the screen. There you are. And Jason Klimek, Esquire. There you are. And it seems so cliche for the MC or interviewer to go through someone's bio, but I believe the best way to describe someone's background is to hear it from that person. So Zach, Jason, just give a brief background of perhaps why you're even here as our guest.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Richard, and everybody on the RocGrowth team. Really grateful to be here again. Honestly, think about the collisions that have happened since the last time I was with y'all. It's just really grateful for this opportunity again. My name is Zach Sarkis. I am an entrepreneur, aspiring farmer, aspiring florist, dog dad. I've been in the cannabis industry in one way, shape, or form for 5 years, and really my relationship to the plant goes back beyond a decade. I'm an educator, been focusing on education through the HempLab platform, which is a registered 501c3. Through that platform, we've reached over 1,000 audience members through our live and digital events. And I'm also in the process of launching a CPG company that's in the realm of cannabis. So love the plant, love educating and engaging around the plant, and I think that's why I'm here.
Right. My friend Jason, yeah.
I'm Jason Klimek. Thank you for having me and inviting me. I'm a local attorney at Boylan Code law firm. I'm the head of the Cannabis Practice. I have been in the cannabis space for a little over 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. I started with working with the government directly on the tax aspects of the bill, and it just kind of blossomed from there as I got more involved with organizations like HempLab, like RocNormal, which is the Rochester chapter of the National Organizations for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And I work with local entrepreneurs and really try to support local businesses, keep residents here, attract residents here. And I too, like Zach, really enjoy educating. Him and I taught this past semester at FLCC. We taught a cannabis regulation class, and it was a lot of fun. It was our first time doing it, and we had a lot of fun doing that. So education is a huge component of this because it's a very complex topic with a lot of different issues. And frankly, Zach and I can speak forever on this. So it's great to have this audience to talk to and engage on these topics.
Thank you. So let's start by framing it. You would give it what kind of probability of being legalized? We're talking about marijuana being legalized this year in New York.
From my perspective, I would say that it's as close to 100% as you can get. But of course, there's always, that asterisk of anything could happen. Last year I would have said the same thing and then COVID happened. So who knows, but I would say, but for COVID, it would have already been legalized. So I think that we're in the exact same place this year.
So issue number one, implicit in your response is that Albany will decide, meaning the legislature and the governor. Let's highlight in Massachusetts and New Jersey, it was the voters, the public that decided. Is that correct?
Yes, they did it through public referendum, which we don't have in New York.
Right. So ultimately, our elected officials are getting to make this decision. It is not a unanimous opinion of the public that marijuana should be legalized or is good. There's lack of data, but there are many people that would contend it's a gateway drug, it breeds crime, driving under the influence is perhaps equivalent to someone who drives with too much alcohol in their system. What are the public officials stating to justify their support? What is generally the explanation to the public? How are they responding to the opposition?
I would say from the legislative side, they are really focusing on the social equity components and looking back through history and seeing how cannabis prohibition, particularly as we're talking about legalization, but really drug prohibition in general, has disproportionately targeted certain communities. And so from that perspective, they say, look, we need to rectify those wrongs going forward. We need to encourage entrepreneurialism, small businesses in these communities and help those communities from the harm that has happened to them in the past. So I think that's the legislative perspective of why they're pushing this so hard. The governor's perspective seems to be more along the lines of we desperately need the revenue. And, that's one viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I second what Jason said. It definitely seems that the legislature, there's the even in the governor's opening language, when he did that report following, pre-legalization, but that was basically proposing why legalization should be something to be considered. I think this was in 2018. His language within that bill, the first pages were talking about, the impact on the war on drugs, specifically in Black communities, specifically in urban communities and low-income populations in general. And I think that we've seen that messaging, as Jason said, carried through the Senate and Assembly bills that are very much rooted in reinvestment and from the lens of both economic as well as social reinvestment, like building the infrastructure to allow for communities to recover, to have choice and reinvest in themselves, as well as I believe the more small businesses there are, the more surface area there is within a community for economic opportunity, for betterment of livelihood. And I think you can really see that in the legislative bills, whereas again, the governor's bill alludes to it, but has maybe, let's say, loopholes or open doors for it not to be so clear, not to be so direct. And it definitely, if you look at the tax structure, I'm sure we'll get into that more, but Jason and I would like to say that on a level, the governor's bill is dead on sight, given the tax structure and how that would basically reverse much of what's being proposed for positive impact, whether that's economic or social. So I think we're definitely hitting it on the head right there.
Yeah. So for those of us in the audience who aren't as familiar with the current state of affairs in Albany and the progression of the legislation, why don't you bring everyone up to speed where it is now? Obviously, it's a component of the budgets. The Cuomo prides himself in 8 or 9 now years of passing the budget on time, which was not that common with his predecessor. So bring us up to speed, fill us in, please.
So we have the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, that is the legislative bill, MRTA, and we have the Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act, that's the CRTA, that's the governor's bill. Since 2018, the governor has been proposing the CRTA as part of the budget. Since 2015, the MRTA has been in the legislature. It's usually sitting in the Finance Committee in the Senate. And recently, both of those have made more progress towards becoming law. But right now, they're kind of locked in a battle of which one is going to win out. And this year, we have a brand new dynamic that we're dealing with insofar as the 2020 elections provided a veto-proof majority for the Democrats in the Senate, which has never happened before. So now Cuomo has the very real possibility that the entire legislature could override a veto. So they could potentially use that as leverage to push their bill. So we're kind of seeing these two bills fighting it out. Cuomo had just recently, I believe yesterday, the day before, made some amendments, or has announced that he was making some amendments to his bill to somewhat get closer to the legislative bill. It's still, I think, miles apart. And as Zach kind of said, it's dead in the water as far as I think the legislature is concerned, because Cuomo has not bridged that gap between the two bills.
Well, thank you for the political analysis, because what we see here is there's money, and there are two branches of government. That veto-proof majority is Democrat. Governor's a Democrat, but there's power. There's a power play going on in Albany, much like this past week around the nursing home issues. It's very interesting, and oftentimes it's so Byzantine and it seems so distant, Albany does, that it's really hard to keep track of these things. So thank you. So there's MRTA, which would be in the legislature. There's the CRTA, so C is Cuomo, M is legislature. And what would be the key provisions for people who are interested in this topic, but perhaps not vested in it as much as some of the participants and you?
Zach, you want to tackle
that?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a huge question. I do think, little plug right now, HempLab, which will feature Jason Klimek and Lise Bergio, two of the leading cannabis attorneys in New York State, we'll be putting on a 5-part series. It'll be really diving into the weeds on the MRTA specifically. So we'll follow up with that. But I do want to just kind of preface that there is so much in these bills that if you aren't looking at the fine print, there's a lot to miss. I think just rereading the different licensing, for example, in adult use through the MRTA last night, there are so many finicky nuances between, if you have this license, you can have no relationship to that license or to that license. And I think that's good for small business. I think it's good for entrepreneurs and creating a very diverse ecosystem. I think it's going to stifle a lot of big picture vision of how you're going to just take over the cannabis industry or get your foot in the door. And I think those things are really important. Like, the licensing is very complex. There's definitely a lot of emphasis on social equity, diversity within this industry that I think will have, especially in the MRTA, the legislative bill, impact on how licenses are given out. So I think that's something to be critically aware of. I really think, like, this isn't a cash grab. And as we've seen in other states, like the flood is real. Everyone runs at the industry with money, thinking that they can find their share. And a lot of people end up at the bottom, where there's a few floating on the surface. And I think those are just things to be very aware of. Like, I can't tell you how many people have been like, hey, I want to start a grow, whether it's hemp, whether it's THC in the future. And I am definitely at a point where I feel hesitant and more protective for the people who are approaching me, as well as for the industry, than thinking that this is going to be a big free for all and everyone's going to make a whole bunch of money off it. So I think that it starts with the fine print within the bills that we're looking at that will determine what is even allowed and how. I think we're looking at startup costs, which are just, what do they say? Twice as long, twice as expensive in general if you're starting a business. If you're imagining something rolling out, and I think it could be probably higher for the cannabis industry. And yeah, I also think, that there is really a lack of expertise, and, whether it's from a supply chain perspective or just knowledge chain, that all these things are going to make it really tough for New York State. And there's also a lot of opportunity. So I'll pass it off to Jason, because I see his mind's rolling as well, but I think those are some key things to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add some like concrete examples of some differences that are very easily comprehensible. So, MRTA, legislator bill. We have currently 9, 10, depending on how you count it, registered organizations. Those are the medical marijuana companies. All but one of them are what we call multi-state operators, MSOs. These are companies where hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars are operating in Colorado, California, all the legal states. They're currently fully vertically integrated, meaning they grow, they process, and they sell at their dispensaries right now in New York. The MRTA has a provision that says those same fully vertically integrated companies can also be, well, let me back up one second. Both bills, MRTA and CRTA, do not allow in the adult use market vertical integration, full vertical integration. You can grow and or process, but if you do one of those or both of those, you cannot own a dispensary. You can't even have an indirect interest in a dispensary, meaning like you couldn't be the landlord to a dispensary. So both those bills prohibit it. However, both bills contain an exception. The current ROs, the current medical companies, can get a fully integrated adult use license. The difference is the MRTA requires that any product produced by that RO is only sold through the RO's dispensaries, meaning they can grow and they can process, but they can only sell those goods in their own dispensaries, and those would be limited. I think the bill says that they're limited to 4 dispensaries in the entire state.
Yeah.
The CRTA doesn't contain that language. So they could be fully vertically integrated, sell at their own dispensaries, but they can also sell their products to any other third-party dispensary they want. Now, that may not seem like a huge difference until you start thinking about the economic implications. When you are a multi-million-dollar operating company, who, by the way, has already been operating for the past 5 years, and has already established a brand, you're going to have lower costs. You're fully vertically integrated. You are doing everything yourself. There's not a profit margin at every single level. You can put your products out into dispensaries at a much lower cost than, say, the small business who's first starting up. Not to mention the CRTA's tax rates are legitimately insane. They go well into the 60% range, whereas the MRTA is 22%.
So what this makes me think of is the regulatory scheme for alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And giving Budweiser the ability to open up bars or to dispense their alcohol retail and own the vertical supply chain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect analogy. So that, I mean, that is one of the, fairly easy to comprehend, I guess, differences that really kind of shows you where the emphasis is in the bills. In the MRTA, it's much more, we want to give small businesses a chance to compete in this market. The CRTA says, well, we want a very highly regulated market. We've already entrusted the ROs to do this. Let's let them have all these systemic advantages. And so it falls down to, what, the analysis really should be what is most beneficial to the residents of New York. But that may not be the calculus that's being used ultimately to determine which bill to pass.
Is it fair to say there are a few lobbyists in Albany that are, or doing it virtually, trying to persuade one side of their opinion? There must be a lot of scrambling going on in Albany around some of these vested interests.
There might be a few. I always encourage people to look. It's public information. You can see who donates to political campaigns. You can see what companies donate to political campaigns. That's all public data. And so, yeah, absolutely. There are lobbyists pushing certain provisions. Everybody's going to have their say. And unfortunately, we know that in our democracy, that money tends to get results. So that's why it's really important. This is one of the things that I really want to emphasize is that our representatives work for us. And I think that people forget that fact a lot. They listen to you. That's how I got started with this whole cannabis thing is I had a meeting with my local representative and I said, there's this bill. I have these concerns with it. I'd really like to talk to you about this. And they welcomed me with open arms because I came at them with data, research, and that's how I kind of got started. And so I encourage everybody, when you have opinions about these things, reach out to your legislators. They want to hear what their constituents say because I can absolutely and unequivocally tell you the people who are opposed to legalization, they are the minority. Like Channel 8, CBS, our local station, did a poll online. I think it was 79% of the viewers supported legalization. 79% of Americans or New Yorkers tend to not agree on anything. But so it is a large majority that agree on legalization. Yet the most vocal people are the minority who opposes it. And you can bet that they are contacting their legislative representatives. So always encourage people, to remember that they work for us. If you have an opinion, reach out to them.
We had a bit of a sea change in our region in terms of our delegation to Albany. A new generation, and I believe all of our assembly people and state senators are Democrats at the moment. Two of them, I know one in particular had registered and would be here. And I, from personal experience, realize the impact one can have locally on politics. So this is part of that. That's part of the reason why we're hosting this event today. Our voices can be heard, and those of you who feel impelled to, whether it's pro or con, or there's a specific item, should feel like we live in a democratic system. It's imperfect. I saw a comment in the chat box that was excoriating the politicians. I suggest that we remind them we work for them and we're squeaky wheels, that politicians have a lot of issues on their plate, and to expect them to have more than an inch depth of knowledge about this specific issue is unrealistic. Some might. But we're there to educate them, correct? And I believe Jason and Zach have been doing that.
Yeah, I would argue, there's some people I see in the chat saying like how and why, or will they listen? And I'll tell you what I've seen direct correlation between conversations that I've been in the room with Jason or alongside Jason, changes in proposed tax structure, changes in the definition of cooperatives and what that means for small businesses, micro businesses. And these are conversations from a small coalition of committed individuals who want to see a rollout of something that's business friendly, that's socially equitable and rooted in justice, and combating the injustices that we've seen. And there are a small group of people who've been working for years on behalf of small business, on behalf of people disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, et cetera, that have literally shaped the language within these bills. Now, I wouldn't say that if you try to go to the governor's office and get that put in, that it'll be very accessible, but I do know, and I've seen on a personal level, the impact of knocking on a door in Albany, having a conversation backed up by data, and watching the language in a proposed bill change. And we have individuals locally who can sign on and be co-signers of existing bills that we know are small business friendly, they're going to be New York friendly, et cetera. And that literally starts with a conversation. Definitely takes some research. It takes, there's value in connecting to entities like the NY CGPA, the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, the Start Smart Coalition, which is combating and focused on recovering from the war on drugs and ensuring social justice and equity through drug policy. RocNormal has been, our local chapter has been incredibly resourceful and respected down in Albany because they show up with data pamphlets that change perspective. As Jason said, the anti-cannabis people are louder than anyone else in the room. It's the devil's weed. It's the worst thing on the planet. But people who are showing up reasonably, with facts, with data, that it doesn't make our roads more dangerous, use isn't skyrocketing in places where it's legalized, et cetera. That's the way to calm the nerves. But then we can also provide data, like someone said, the microbreweries, data that shows what happened to our economy when small players had access to the alcohol industry. How does that change things? And how is that a replication, a reflection of what this industry could be for small businesses in New York? So I got a lot of passion, and I've learned a lot in the past couple of years about the simple act of reaching out and engaging with our local politicians. So I want to just beat that in a little farther.
There are so many great comments in the chat. I don't see a Q&A feature, but I'm going to rely on chat for comments as I assemble them. But we have a series of public service announcements, if you will, scheduled, but you keep referring to the RocNormal, and Mary Kruger is here. And if Mary can say a few words about her good work and share with the community what RocNormal is about. Mary.
Thanks, Richard.
We
So
don't see you. Is that because it's a bad hair day?
oh yeah, I don't show my camera.
That's okay.
I work from home, so
I recognize your voice. Don't worry.
Got my name. So yeah, as Richard said, my name is Mary Kruger. I am the founder and executive director of RocNormal. So we, again, are the Rochester chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Our mission is to educate the public about the benefits of responsible cannabis use while working to reform the laws surrounding cannabis prohibition. And we advocate that consumers have access to high quality cannabis that's safe, convenient, and affordable in a normalized and destigmatized environment. So a whole mouthful, but that is, the mission of National Normal as well. And we carry that on down to our local chapter. And our chapter, as Zach and Jason have mentioned, we're part of the Start Smart Coalition. And so we focus heavily on, making sure that this legislation that we pass is rooted in justice, equity, and reinvestment back into communities that have been most disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition. And so, Jason is one of our board members, and RocNormal is a sister partner organization with NY HempLab. So we all work very closely together. And as Zach and Jason have mentioned, a lot of our work involves, in non-COVID times, traveling down to Albany, setting up meetings, talking to our legislature or legislative representatives, and really changing their mind on this issue. It has been really amazing to see the transformation from 3 years ago when we started to where we are now. And I tell you, they actually get excited to see us in Albany. They love talking to us about marijuana reform because there's a lot of things that they have to talk about all day that aren't as exciting as this issue. So, I mean, we have that benefit that people actually want to be talking to us when we're in their offices. But we've gotten several co-sponsors on the bill locally. Senator Jeremy Cooney recently signed on as a co-sponsor. Assemblymember Harry Bronson is a co-sponsor on the MRTA. So, you know, we're in conversation with Senator Summer Brouk and Assemblymember Lunsford, and just continuing to build that support. And so we are currently working on organizing some virtual lobby days and action alerts. So if you want to stay updated and get involved, you can sign up for our email list. I'll drop the link in the chat here, and you can also go to rocknormal.org to check out some more about us.
Cool. Don't underestimate the importance of having a delegation that works together, as Rochester now does. They even convene weekly, the Assembly and Senate. And to the extent they could collaborate with Syracuse and Rochester's delegation that are also Democrats, the more we can be a counterweight to the disproportionate influence downstate has, and their interests and ours aren't always aligned for a variety of valid reasons, but we have to have our voice heard. For instance, the Finger Lakes, we'll reserve this for a moment, is an amazing agricultural and recreational area. And, you know, they don't have that in Manhattan or other parts of Metro New York. I am, actually, let's use that as a bit of a segue, and then I'll proceed with some more of these public service announcements. Where do you see the opportunity? How if the final outcome leans more MRTA and supportive of perhaps entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, and innovators in the area, what kind of opportunity would the Rochester region, enjoy?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think one thing I love to do, and we've had in conversation, Richard, is outlining really the infrastructure that is in our region. The agricultural infrastructure, the land, the knowledge base, Cornell University, our medical community, our tech community, access to fresh water, relatively affordable electricity or power, especially if you go a little bit more westward. I think those are all things that are going to be really important. I think that in a MRTA world, just the entrepreneurial spirit of this region, like it's almost redundant to say, because we know it, we live it. This is an entrepreneur-based platform, but like I can't say enough about the sharp minds that are in this region, that have been in this region, whether they're an executive or they're on the street. And I mean that from the level, like people who are still in the industry today before we approve of it as a culture. So there are a ton of people. There's just so many success stories across the board. And one thing I do hope is that, people who are in the industry today have a place in that industry tomorrow, once the general public says it's appropriate. I'll be frank, it's essentially, the people of low income, specifically the Black community or the communities of color, have a place at this table where we see the cannabis industry being dominated by white male executives across the board with multi-million-dollar acquisitions left and right. And doesn't mean I imagine one way or the other as what the average racial profile will be of an individual who has access to this industry. But I do know that there's so many people already playing here, and I hope they have a seat at the table moving forward. Because there's going to be, if all things go forward as they stand, we're looking at the possibility of on-site consumption. Whether that's a lounge or a bar, looking at delivery licenses that basically won't allow businesses with more than 25 employees to be delivering on more than a couple locations. So again, the way that it's structured is for more people to have access to the industry, especially from the start. The micro businesses that allow for vertical integration on a very small scale, that would be like our farm brewery structure, where a farm can or a winery can have tasting on site, and they can produce at a different tax rate, for example, is done at a very small scale. And it allows them to have access to different taxation as well as direct to consumer, which again, the desire for everyone would be, not everyone, but there's a value in having vertical integration. And there's a value in having it to be a little bit more segmented, especially in the onset. I do think that looking at the way that licenses are going to be granted and the time frame and the requirements for holding on to licenses is something to be keenly aware of. Something we saw in Canada was essentially they allowed hundreds of licenses, but allowed them all to be sold essentially, and they were all gobbled up, and a few companies owned a predominant share of licenses, which kind of created, monopoly. And the way the language reads right now is it doesn't allow for that, but I do think it's something to be aware of like who can have access to what under what time frame, and how to prevent the market consolidating too quickly. And maybe that's a little bit of a protectionist mindset, but I can't underlie it enough that there are multi-million-dollar companies, if not billion-dollar companies, who want in on New York State yesterday. And so I believe as we see the craft industry booming in the greater Rochester Finger Lakes region, we have a choice between our Labatt Blue or our Three Heads Brewery. We have the choice between our wineries, our cheeseries, our craft food farm to table platform, or the massive scale. And it kind of comes down to like your dollar, your vote. And I think just as individuals here, we should be considering how are we going to be investing our money. There's a plethora of opportunity for technology. I know there's some folks on this call who are expertise in technology, and that will anything to make the tech requirements through traceability less burdensome for the small business is going to be huge. Distribution licenses, etc. There's a lot to be excited about, but I will say that for all the entrepreneurs on this call who are interested in how are they going to get involved, it's really asking the question of what is your expertise and how can that be supplemental to or directly connected to this industry versus deciding that you just want to be a grower, that you want to grow because that's where the greatest margin's going to be. And we can talk more about like that kind of critical analysis of how to get involved. But I'm definitely, I don't know exactly what our region will thrive in. And I know that I'll be critical that it's going to be a very competitive environment. We're a little bit off the beaten track away from New York City. There's these things that like proximity, we have a lot of great resources, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be a given, especially when there's hubs like Binghamton popping up or Albany or Hudson Valley, honestly, where there's, I think, a lot of movement and progress and great branding and things that are coming out of that region. So I think that something I am most excited about, I'll beat it in again, is the craft industry. And as a community, how we shape and tell that story is what will allow our region to be successful. And it'll allow for, unicorns to pop out and through, but it'll also allow for stability and a cohesive, I think, strategy that will require, community input and collective decision-making as to where we want this industry to go.
Okay, wait, Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just, thanks, Zach, incredible. Thank you for all the commentary. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of questions coming in through the chat that are very specific, and I'm going to get really corny here and say they're getting into the weeds, right? But the reality is I want to be able to address those questions. We don't have time because we have an hour-long program here today, but there's a link that I posted in the chat, and that is to the New York HempLab. And I would encourage everybody who has really specific comments or questions to go to that and sign up. I think it's $10. And so please utilize that because there are some really specific questions that are coming in that I think go beyond our sort of general conversation around this theme. One thing that did come in, and this is maybe a question for Zach and Jason, but there's a couple of people asking about different types of mass incarceration and what are there components to the bills that address that.
Yeah, I was just about to, there are three issues. First of all, there is that one because issues get conflated around social justice and inequities. The fact, and some of this is in the legislation, in the dispute, is that marijuana has been used as a method to build and sustain the criminal justice system or the failures in the criminal justice system. So, you know, we have massive incarceration, and so there's that element. And I think the governor has a different approach than the legislature wants, right? And then there's the element that addresses fairness for people who want to get into the business, which sort of overlaps the imbalances that exist in other areas for people who want to create and build wealth and certain discriminatory obstacles. So, and just perhaps, why don't, if you have a response to that, Zach and Jason, please share it now. Okay, so I want to be mindful of time. I just want, because I hear people conflating these issues together, and they're very distinct. Expunging criminal records.
Yeah.
People who have been incarcerated is very different than giving someone of color a fair chance to get a license to open up a dispensary. So the public service announcement portion, and I see you're right there in front of me, Christopher, who I was with Sunday. Chris, do you want to unmute, please, and share a little bit about our main man, Freddie D? Uh-oh, you've frozen up, or you're not. Okay, could someone unmute her, please? Do you see Christopher?
Yeah, Tom, can you grab that? Do you see her?
I'm looking for her right now.
Or we can jump to someone else in the interim, if you prefer. Is Andrew Brady? Andrew, my man.
Christopher Carter, is it?
No, Christine Christopher. And then we have Andrew Brady, Barb Eggenhofer.
Christine's ready.
All right.
Thank you so much. And I won't take up much of your time. This is such an interesting conversation, but I certainly very much welcome the opportunity to tell you about what's going on with the Re-Energizing the Legacy of Frederick Douglass project, which I'm here to represent today. The project was started in 2018 by Professor Carvin Eisen and Blue Cease, and they started the project to recognize the contributions of Frederick Douglass during the bicentennial year of his birth, and asked me to join their effort, which has been really a great thing. The main thing that you may know about that we have done is we've put statues all over the city of Rochester that were created by the artist Olivia Kim, a remarkable person, and created the douglasstour.com website. So you can visit all of those sites. Right now, we are in the process of raising money to put a bronze statue of Frederick Douglass at the newly renamed airport. The fiberglass statues that we have on the street are not permanent, were never meant to be. And the wonderful reason for putting this at the airport actually goes back in time. The monument of Frederick Douglass in Highland Park, many people don't know, was the first ever created to commemorate the achievements of an African-American citizen in the nation. And at the time of its creation, it was installed at the main train station. And the reason was the mayor at that time wanted everyone who visited Rochester to understand what Frederick Douglass meant to our community. Well, what he means to our community is something that has never been forgotten and deserves to be commemorated again. So now we are in the midst of raising money for that statue project. We would love to have you join us in that. And if you are interested in doing so, I would encourage you to get in touch with Rochester Community Media and ask to speak to Carvin Eisen, and he would be very happy to talk with you about the project. And Richard, Chris, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and Chris, would you drop his email link or some means?
Into the chat box?
Yes, please. And I just want to let you know, Chris is a gift in the community. She did
Oh,
brag. She's an incredibly talented documentary filmmaker, and you probably have already seen some of her work, particularly about the uprising in 1964, what some people call the riot, but the
we
uprising.
don't.
And yeah, incredible work. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, Barb, are you around? Barb Eggenhofer? Barb's connected to Rock 2025. Her initiative, Campus Rock, is under their aegis, and want to give her an opportunity to say a few words if we can find her.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, thank you, Richard and Chris and the RocGrowth team. I'm Barb Egenhofer. I'm the Director of Talent Strategy for Rock 2025. If you're not familiar too much with Rock 2025, it's an alliance of economic development organizations dedicated to making Greater Rochester one of the most dynamic and rapidly growing regional economies in the United States. And the mission that we have for our talent strategy group is we want to bring new programs that expand the size of our employable labor force by recruiting new talent, retaining the great talent that we have, and connecting those people who are looking for work to employers who are searching for talent. So there's two initiatives that are launching this quarter that I just wanted to highlight really quickly. One is Campus Rock, and our mission behind Campus Rock is to promote the Greater Rochester region as an attractive destination for students to obtain a world-class degree from one of our many outstanding colleges and universities, and as an ideal community to establish and grow a meaningful career post-graduation. So we've got some key initiatives that just launched. We just launched our Campus Rock website. I'll put that in the chat for you. We have a very robust social media campaign. You can find us Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We just launched an internship in a box program. That's a step-by-step guide for employers who want to start an intern or co-op experience at their organizations to help them with that. We are launching new student programming with the idea of bringing students from all of the different colleges and universities together for some fun and unique experiences and key learning opportunities. And then we're currently in the process of planning College Fest, which will be a welcome to Rochester, the 5 best hours of your life, fingers crossed, hopefully in downtown in the fall. So that's one big initiative. And again, I'll put that in the chat so you can follow us. The second one that I just want to touch on is I am probably 90% done building a new career portal. That'll be rochestercareers.com. And my goal is to have every open position in Rochester posted on this site. So whether you're a high school student looking for your first, part-time job after school, or you're a seasoned executive looking for a new opportunity, you can go to this one site and it will have everything consolidated in there for you. So super excited about that and more to come. So always looking for volunteers, always looking for people who will follow us, share, connect us to the colleges and universities, host an internship at your organization, or sponsor an event. And I guess just to make the connection back to the conversation today and talking about data, I think it would be fascinating to learn what is the data that links college enrollment to places, communities with legalization. That'd be interesting to know. So thanks again for the time. Appreciate it.
Cool. So Barb's doing amazing work breaking down the boundaries, the silos that have existed for years. The degree of collaboration in the community, each university and college is represented, is wonderful. And I feel glad to be able to contribute in part because it's key to our mission to empower the new generation. And you're in the farm league. If we can keep those kids in Rochester and get them gainful employment and contribute, it will be better for everyone in the community. Thank you. So, and Andrew, are you present?
I am. Can you hear me?
Capitalism. Yes, Andrew.
Hi all. I see a bunch of familiar faces, not only from RocGrowth, but I know that some of you at least are familiar with Conscious Capitalism. But for those that aren't, we are a local chapter of a global movement that's been going around for about 10 years. We founded it in 2013. So we're in March, actually, we'll be coming up on our 8th year. But Conscious Capitalism is based on purposeful businesses that are focused on, the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, and really focus on how to balance the needs of all of the stakeholders, whether that's the community, the customers, the employees, and the environment, in addition to, but not superseded by stockholders, which too often is the case. And so we are kind of similar to RocGrowth, a community that meets relatively regularly to share great stories, and we we actually have a meeting coming up next Wednesday at noon. So if any of you are available, we're actually having the CEO of the global organization that'll be talking with us about kind of what he sees, but also taking questions and kind of having a conversation on what we collectively see as the opportunities for really remaking our economy after, what was such a tumultuous 2020, and really looking at both economic justice, racial justice, climate justice, and the ways that I think the need for really systemic change has always been there, but never been more apparent and never been more urgent. And so would love to have you at that at that conversation next Wednesday at noon, like RocGrowth. Just free, but you got to register. So I'm putting the link in the chat here. You can also find us on Facebook or consciouscapitalismroc.org and get on our mailing list. And also stay tuned, because we're talking about doing a collaborative event with RocGrowth in the not too distant future. So either way, you'll be stuck learning more about us.
Cool. So as we wrap up, we're coming up to 1 o'clock. I just let's talk a bit about the future. Right. I hear some background noise.
Apologize, one more. That's probably me.
Okay, sorry. So my dog was barking before, the age of Zoom. So let's all recognize this substance is federally criminalized. Not only that, it's a Schedule I narcotic equivalent to cocaine or LSD, all right? Which results in a dearth of research, like a great research university like Cornell, which has an amazing ag school, cannot conduct research because it would jeopardize all their federally funded research. Let's discuss marijuana is not just a product that some people enjoy for the high THC to get high. Let's discuss the breadth of its applications and its future, and that might also tie in to why this region is well positioned to enjoy benefits. It might not occur immediately, but I think both of you, again, are experts. Zach, your work at HempLab has informed me about some of this potential. So please respond. Now you're on mute.
Unmute, cool. Yeah, I think it's, just for a moment, I think it's imperative that we consider cannabis as a whole. There are grain varieties, there are fiber varieties, and there's resin varieties. Of the resin, there's CBD, which we see in CBD hemp, and there's THC, which we consider this marijuana. And I think that that's important to understand where cannabis will bring this industry. I think it's overinflated number, but there's 25,000 uses for cannabis, from paper, fiber, oils, nutrient-rich food that's come from the seed, as well as an incredibly valuable resin. And that resin can be a narcotic, it can be a spiritual tool, it can be a medicine for a plethora of things. So I think that as we begin to see the normalization of cannabis, first and foremost, I imagine if we look at those who are in favor of cannabis, how many people are closeted cannabis consumers in one way, shape, or form, that if you've ever been to somewhere where it's legal, the relief of actually not being a criminal for choosing to consume a plant over alcohol is something that I think will have a very important impact on our community at large. beyond that, beginning to look at the world of the connoisseur of cannabis, whether you're looking to get stoned or you're looking to taste or to smell or to see or to explore. That's something we already see with our being a wine capital region of this country that's growing in recognition. I think the experience of cannabis is something that will, our region will have a great opportunity to leverage. And if we just scale back out a little bit and looking at the Ledestries, the Constellations, the Wegmans, consider distribution, consider CPG. We are a hub for having access to high quality, being known for being strong, branded. And I think that's really going to inform how this industry builds out, especially from a craft experiential place. Because again, Marlboro is ready. Altria is ready to invest in New York State. Canopy Growth is knocking down the door of New York State. The only differentiator between keeping money, reducing brain drain, keeping youth here and inspired in livable wage jobs, and is again shaping an industry that is supportive to the entrepreneur, supported to the craft business. Because where there's more surface area, there's more opportunity to generate revenue. Where there's more constructive and creative collisions, there's more business and inspiration and culture. Culture, whether it be the arts or the art of tasting cannabis. I think those things will really influence where this industry will go and what will keep it as a regional blossoming thing that keeps the money here, keeps the money going through our local regional economies.
Any final remarks, Jason or Zach, before I wrap up?
Yeah, I think, we do have an opportunity specifically here, New York State in general, but here to really embrace this economy, new jobs. It's one of the things that the members of NYCGPA like to say, it'd be better to create 1,000 millionaires than 1 billionaire. And so, I think that Rochester does have that potential to really facilitate a robust economy. And it's not just selling cannabis, it's potential research. We have world-class researchers here, as Zach said, that can't touch the plant at all. And so if it's legalized in the state, while federally funded research universities still won't be able to touch it, it does open the doors to more researchers getting into the area, finding out benefits, because then you can start making claims if you can actually prove those claims. And so, there's a whole world to be discovered. And I think our region is very well positioned for it.
Cool. So before I wrap up, I apologize for any of the participants. If you feel left out, it's a challenge to navigate through the chat and incorporate all the remarks. So forgive me. But Jason put some information, his contact information in, as did Zach. So you should feel free to reach out to them. info@RocGrowth is a way to get a hold of me and the team. If you have any input or you want to help out, we can use a little assistance in our digital media strategy or digital marketing. We're a volunteer team of Tom Myers, Chris Cooley. We have Josh Krager, the impresario behind Rochester Open Coffee Club, which occurs Wednesday mornings. Josh, you might want to put something in the chat as we're wrapping up about that. And Zara Ali and Andrew Brady, who you heard from a moment ago. We're still incubating our upcoming events. We have some interesting concepts, but feel free, the door is always open, the digital door at info@RocGrowth, and some of you know how to get a hold of any of the team members directly. So I wish you a wonderful remainder of February. We'll come back probably in March. Stay warm, stay healthy, please. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to convene in person. And finally, don't forget, the next couple of months are critical in terms of legalizing marijuana in New York. Contact your legislators or the governor if you have an opinion. And Chris, if you have a final remark, I'm going to
just want to say thanks to everyone. Thank you, Richard. Great interview. Thanks to Jason and Zach and the whole team behind the scenes. I will say that the link that I posted, the Hemp Labs link, is something that Zach had referred me to for all these questions. I apologize we weren't able to get to all of them in great detail, but there's a big conversation around this. So this is, I think, a starting point for a lot of people. And just bless everyone. Appreciate you all.
This will be posted on our website and published as a podcast within 24 to 48 hours. So there are ways to share this with the community. Thank you, everyone.
Cool.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.